News when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Amy Morris. Here's your closing bell for this Wednesday on Wall Street, where traders reacted to weaker than expected economic data, reinforcing speculation that the Fed will cut interest rates at least twice this year. We bring you those closing numbers each day here at Bloomberg. The S&P 500 pretty much flat, gaining about a half a point, not even a half a point. NASDAQ gained 62 points. The Dow lost 92 points. The 10-year Treasury yield at 4.36% and the 2-year yield at 3.87%. The Department of Education now says Columbia University has violated federal anti-discrimination law and, they say, fails to meet the standards for accreditation, and says that Columbia University's leadership was indifferent toward the harassment of Jewish students on campus after Hamas's October 7th attack on Israel. President Trump had a phone call with Russian leader Vladimir Putin, warning him that he would retaliate for a recent Ukrainian drone strike on Russian airfields. Bloomberg's Joe Matthew on Trump's Truth Social post about that phone call.
It was a good conversation, Trump says, but not a conversation that will lead to immediate peace. The president writes that Putin did say, and very strongly, that he will have to respond to the recent attack on the airfields, of course, referring to Ukraine's drone strikes deep in Russia that was in response to one of the most blistering missile attacks Russia has ever carried out.
Trump and Putin also discussed ongoing nuclear talks with Iran. Tennessee Republican Senator Bill Hagerty says the president has a right to seek out other world leaders to find allies.
But at the end of the day, it's going to be up to us to take the leadership position to deal with Iran and to make certain that they don't have the capability nor the capacity to threaten the rest of the world as they have in the past. And understand this, they're behind all of the terror and all the disruption in the Middle East. It's got to come to an end.
Download the Balance of Power podcast to hear that entire conversation with Senator Bill Hagerty. He's also a member of the Committee on Foreign Relations. Bloomberg News has learned the U.S. is refusing to provide air cover for the so-called reassurance force that the U.K. and France are planning for a post-war Ukraine. The report comes as NATO defense ministers are gathered in Brussels to discuss ramping up their defense spending. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says he's willing to meet with Putin even without a ceasefire. Putin has dismissed that. The Congressional Budget Office says the House version of President Trump's tax and spending bill would add more than $2.4 trillion to budget deficits over the next decade. Trump administration officials have dismissed CBO projections as inaccurate, but Republican Senator Ron Johnson says the true numbers are probably even worse.
I think the CBO projection, I hate to say, is probably a rosy scenario. There's interest rate risk. There's, again, growth risk. I mean, if you just eliminate the automatic tax increase, which I'm fully supportive of, that's $4 trillion of revenue you have to replace with economic growth. 3% growth barely replaces it.
Tech titan Elon Musk, meanwhile, is ratcheting up his offensive against Donald Trump's signature tax bill, urging Americans to contact their lawmakers to kill the legislation, saying, quote, bankrupting America is not okay. The post came one day after Musk lashed out at the tax bill, describing it as a budget-busting, disgusting abomination. In the bill, President Trump publicly resisted Medicaid cuts, but his budget director, Russell Vought, has convinced him that reductions to health coverage for low-income people is just weeding out fraud and abuse. The Congressional Budget Office estimates at least 7.6 million people would become uninsured if the bill takes effect as it is. The White House has also asked Congress to claw back $9.4 billion in money that has already been approved. It requires the president to get approval from Congress to return money that's already been appropriated. The Congressional Budget Office estimates the government is on track to spend roughly $7 trillion this year, with the rescission request equaling just 0.1% of that total. The Beige Book shows economic activity declined slightly, in part because everyone's waiting to see the impact of the tariffs. Bloomberg News Federal Reserve reporter Katerina Sareva.
It's a pretty similar report to what we've been seeing this year. It's showing that businesses and consumers are kind of waiting to see, not making huge decisions yet, kind of waiting to see how this tariff fight plays out.
She says the Fed pays attention to the Beige Book because it gives them a good idea of what's happening on the ground, especially now with so much uncertainty. On Tuesday, Wells Fargo finally got out from under a Federal Reserve asset cap that has restricted its size since early 2018. 2018. Today, Wells Fargo CFO Mike Santomassimo says customers have stuck with the bank.
When you look through and see, the engagement that we had throughout the years, the engagement was still quite good across many of the businesses with our customers. What you didn't see happening, though, over those years was growth.
Wells Fargo CFO Mike Santomassimo says the bank still has some work to do to remove the rest of the consent order. That's news when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Amy Morris. This is Bloomberg.